Hey all, Dr. Jared here. Proud to be coming to you live with our Younger Tomorrow Masterclass. So while of course everyone has to age, it's how we age. How do we feel? How do we look? So often when we talk about being younger, we think about how we look, and certainly we are going to address many components to that. But being younger ultimately is how your body functions. And so I've had quite a few people this week say, okay, so new topic, how is this going to affect me? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, who doesn't want to look younger? Who doesn't want to feel better? Who doesn't want to have more energy? But when we look and currently, I don't know about yours, but I'll tell you, if I'm on social media, most frequently, I would say I still use Instagram. Like if I look at it, almost everything that gets marketed, markets in the healthcare field is about feeling better or looking better. Whether that's how to stimulate less wrinkles, more hair growth. I don't know, maybe it's the age that I'm at, but the reality, I saw one of my favorite short videos that I ever saw. It showed this really, really attractive, beautiful woman, and showed her face. And then it showed, I'm sure this is with AI, but it showed her face with high cortisol, and it got a lot more wrinkly. And it showed her face with liver disease, and basically it got more spotty, and it got more, her skin looked worse. And then it showed with thyroid dysfunction, and her face and neck got puffier. And so you could still see this woman, and you could see where there was beauty more underneath. And I think so many of us can relate to that, in that, like, what's the underlying problem, or what's the underlying dysfunction, or what's the root cause? And so, I think about that a lot, that when we there's not a magic pill, there's not a magic, potion or thing that we put on. Anything that we utilize for really looking younger or feeling younger is going to come down to getting your body to function at a higher level, or a better level than it currently is. Even like skincare products and things like that, it's meant to repair or regenerate or resupply the collagen, or whatever it might be. And so, I bring that up because one of the things that we're going to go through, or really most of what we're going to go through today, is how do you help your body, or how do you support your body to function at its highest level, and therefore get the better looking skin, or get the more energy, or get the bigger muscles, or drop the body fat, or whatever it is. Because and I still hear this a lot when people say, well, my grandmother lived to 96, or my whoever. Like, I have longevity genes in my family, and I would say, of course, that's absolutely true. And you should hopefully, if you do have those, feel blessed. I'm lucky enough. I have two grandmothers that are alive. One that I'm actually born on the same day. So we took a picture. She turned 93 and I turned 40 this year. 93 years old, lives in her own house. Medication free, or very, very much close to that. And I have another 87-year-old grandmother who also, they both live in Freeport. They both live in their own houses. My 93-year-old grandmother, my grandfather lived to age 89. And so certainly, I'd love to say, hey, it doesn't matter what I do. There's longevity genes in my family. But now, as they've really looked and mapped genetics, while that might be true, and you may have certain family members that have a really severe genetic predisposition for heart disease or cancer or whatever it might be, as it's estimated that only 15 to 25% of your aging, or your longevity, is linked to your genetics. And I'm sure you've heard me say this before if you've watched more of these master classes, but the Human Genome Project, which is now well over 20 years old, showed and popularized epigenetics, meaning that you can turn genes on and off. And so, frankly, everybody has heart disease genes, and everybody has cancer genes, and everybody has, different genes that can cause them to cause them to die young or to cause them to be unhealthy. And so it largely comes down to some of these things: how you move, what you put in your body, how your frame and your structure is, how many chemicals you're exposed to, what genes are you turning on and off. And so, one of the things we say when a new person starts as a client in there, many of you remember the doctor's report, or that the explanation of your x-rays. And, one thing I say in there, and maybe I've only said this for the last couple of years, but it's like, I don't know anyone who works hard their whole life, gets ready to retire or retires, and wants to spend the rest of it miserable, whether that's miserable pain, unable to do things. But, it's estimated that for over 50% of people, the last quarter of their life is pretty unpleasant in their capacity or their capability. And that doesn't sound fun to me. And so if you can make choices ahead of time, so that you don't end up there, or you give yourself a better percentage, I'd say that's a big part of younger tomorrow. And so it's like, what are the things that you want to be able to do? Whether it's travel, dance, exercise, get up and down. I just had, and he's maybe going to hear this when he listens to it, a pastor start over these last couple of weeks. He's 91 years old. And many of you know, like what most of the doctors, and I know I do, like when you're laying on your back, we stick our hand out and you may or may not grab your hand and have help getting up. He refuses to let me give him my hand, and he like rocks his feet up in the air, and he kicks himself up, and he turns, and he's still at 91, still very agile, still very mobile. And so it's like, what do you want to be able to do? And so based on that, what type of person or what type of activities do you need to do now? And possibly, and this is something to really, really consider, where do you need to invest time, effort, or money to reverse what's maybe stopping you from being at that point? So I'd encourage you to, if you're watching this on recording, pause this right now and actually write down, what are the 5 things, or what are the 3 things, or what do you want to be able to do? Do you want to be able to get up and down on the floor with your grandkids? One of the things for me, I still want to be able to play basketball when I'm 50 or 60. I've mentioned this before, but my father is 69, still plays basketball. I'd like to be able to play golf. I'd like to be able to travel. But also like being able to really use fitness activities, or not get tired at the end of the day, or only need 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep. Not ever say, hey, I can't do that. That's something that I don't want to ever. I don't know how long it'll take, but I don't want to ever say, hey, I can't do that. Maybe I don't want to do that, but I can't do that. And so if we're going to pick the first topic of being younger tomorrow, not getting or choosing to reverse to the maximum potential, diabetes would be maybe the top thing, depending on your age. I mean, diabetes, blood sugar imbalance, and blood sugar dysfunction have huge ramifications on your body. They're going to affect the way you look. They're going to affect your energy levels. And what's crazy about diabetes is, like, you only have something like 1 teaspoon of sugar in your blood at any given time, in those, however many quarts of blood you have. But if you get to 1.5 teaspoons of sugar in your blood, if your liver and your pancreas and your body can't pull it out, you become diabetic. It seems like such a small amount, especially considering how much sugar and refined carbohydrates people tend to throw into their body. And so you maybe can see the slide on here, but if you can't read it, or if you're listening to this on your phone, in 1940, only 1 in 300 people was diagnosed with diabetes. In 1970, 1 in 50. And keep in mind, in 1970, we were able to do the blood work to check for it. Currently, 1 in 3 people over age 65 is diabetic. Plenty more are pre-diabetic. And also, and again, I had somebody ask me this. She was very upset. She's come to see us for 13, 14 years. And she's like, I'm going to see my sister. She's got Alzheimer's. How do you get that? And there's a variety of things. The amount of chemicals you put in your body. It's one of the reasons we're very anti, the regular shots that people get. At least I'm anti the regular shots people get, especially if they're over 65, with heavy metals, exposure to toxins, things like that. But blood sugar, some clinicians actually call Alzheimer's or dementia and Alzheimer's diabetes type 3, because blood sugar and inflammation is so dramatically linked to whether or not you are going to develop Alzheimer's or dementia. And so, really looking at self-identity and how you describe yourself and how you value yourself. Tony Robbins does a really good seminar, or you could actually look him up on a YouTube video if you typed in Tony Robbins and identity. But talking about, if you say, hey, I am a diabetic. Now, if you're a type 1 diabetic, you may be, because you genetically may have turned that on or accidentally had that turn on, or, had different life circumstances occur. But for type 2 diabetes, many people can reverse that or control that. And I don't mean with medication, but what you're putting in your body, especially from a refined carbohydrate standpoint, affects so many of the things that cause you to be more fatigued, feel older, and or look older. So something to consider. And there are some very straightforward ways. I've seen so many people over the years reverse through just lifestyle, diet, exercise adjustments. And we're going to go over specifically a little bit later the things that are most linked to getting your body to naturally regulate your blood sugar and to reverse a condition which is very similar, which is called metabolic syndrome through metabolic conditioning. And so, the thing, like we talk about 1 teaspoon of sugar in your blood, but if you have a Coke or if you have a Sprite, you're going to get 40 you're going to get 40 grams, which I believe is like 10 teaspoons in a single beverage. And so your body has to work really hard to get that out of your system. And so simple refined sugars are one way. If you cut those down, it's amazing how much more energy you'll have and how much faster or better you'll look over time. I talked to my sister. Some of you remember my sister, Brianna. I talked to her this morning and she said, I remember when we would have days where we would be, where I'd be getting ready to go over treatment recommendations with new clients. And I would tell myself like, hey, no, you can't have this muffin today because it'll affect your clarity of thought. And you need to be your best if you want to communicate the best with somebody who really needs, better life, better health, better whatever. And so, going back to this self-value, but sugar and refined carbohydrates. Here's the other thing about sugar and refined carbohydrates. They actually trick you into consuming more calories. So if you look at desserts, for example, overwhelmingly, desserts have very little to no protein. They have high glycemic sweeteners, sugars that tell your brain, hey, consume more. And they tend to have very dense particles, also known as fat, that cause you to consume way more overall calories than you otherwise would eat. So if you ever notice, like if you finish a salad, you're often full. Now your body might crave sugar because of your insulin levels, but you don't actually need it. But then as soon as you consume sugar, as soon as you add that sweet, all of a sudden you can eat more, and your body doesn't crave more salad. It craves more sugar. It craves more dessert. And that's how, for so many people, they put on weight or they get more inflammation. And so if you have a fasting blood glucose over 100, it used to be 110. You could maybe make some debates there. If your waist circumference, these are the things that they talk about. If you have metabolic syndrome, which is another link to aging more quickly, of over 40 inches in men or 35 in women. If your triglycerides are consistently over 150, if your cholesterol. So here's the thing. I still recommend the book, The Paleocardiologist, widely. It's complimentary if you're a client. But when you look at cholesterol, for me, it's not whether or not your total cholesterol is above or below 200. It's the best thing we're looking at is the ratio. What's the ratio of good cholesterol or HDL to your overall cholesterol? And so metabolic syndrome tends to be more when you have much less or lower HDL, but still have a higher than average cholesterol. That's where you're running into things. And there are many things that you can do, such as high intensity exercise, lowering your sugar, which are both linked to bettering the HDL, and then also blood pressure. This is a bit of a two-edged sword because elevated blood pressure is linked to metabolic syndrome. Anything over 130, over 85. In my opinion, that doesn't necessarily mean you want to medicate it, because there is a reality. You don't reverse metabolic syndrome with medication, you hide it. And so when you hide it with medication, you might feel better, or your numbers might be better, or maybe even is mildly life extending. but it's not increasing the function. It's really not likely decreasing your aging process or causing you to have significantly more, energy. And so looking at some of your detox organs now, like for example, your liver. Your liver is one of the most resilient organs in your body. In fact, they say that often your liver won't even show significant warning signs until you've lost about 2/3 of the overall function. But as you start to damage your liver by either putting too much sugar in it, putting too much chemicals in your body, having high inflammation through excessive weight gain, and a variety of other things, over time, it starts to deteriorate. And as you may already be aware, for instance, when you get farther and farther down this liver damage lineup, cirrhosis of the liver is progressively less common due to alcoholism in the overall percentage. What does that mean? It means people are intentionally or unintentionally treating their bodies so poorly that it's not just alcohol that causes cirrhosis of the liver, but it can be exposure to chemicals, it can be lifestyle, it can be sugar, it can be other things that cause oxidative stress, which is also known as chemicals, preservatives, things that you're putting on your skin. But cirrhosis of the liver or liver dysfunction is something that comes in. And as I started to hint at, if you go to what the experts say, it's still, in my opinion, so crazy. I always want to preemptively say I don't think that a doctor is trying to harm you or something, but there is just a reality. Like I had somebody say yes on Wednesday when they're at the clinic, they're like, well, after a fusion, their doctor told them not to get adjusted. And I just kind of smile because it's like, okay, so what's their solution? And frequently the answer is nothing. And if for example, that might be okay if the surgery fixed it. But in our country, if you have a fusion, on average, statistically, you're going to have 3 to 5 in your life, depending on the age that you have it. So the same doctor that's telling you not to go get an adjustment is saying, hey, by the way, this doesn't work. How, if you were getting advice from a fitness instructor and they said, hey, pay me a bunch of money, trust me explicitly, don't trust the guy down the street that is super fit and healthy and whatever, just listen to me. But by the way, all the statistics show what I'm going to tell you to do doesn't work. Sadly, that's the equivalent of what many medical doctors are recommending. Hey, don't worry about lifestyle. Hey, follow the food pyramid. Now there's a joke. I mean, follow the food pyramid. Finally, for one of the first things, the first eras, we have a food pyramid that was changed for the first time in something like 40 or 50 years. Now, I don't think it's widely implemented, but the food pyramid's changed. It turns out the pyramid that you've been been exposed to for the entirety or near entirety of your life was absolute garbage, and they knew it. When you look at any research data, you can see that the food industry, just like the drug industry, bribed, paid people off, and changed things to actually not benefit people's health. And whether you think that should be allowed or shouldn't be allowed, it doesn't really matter. If you want to be younger tomorrow, you need to look at how are you going to take all this plethora of information that's out there and apply it to you. Because the cool thing about the world that we live in is information is no longer hidden. It can no longer be garnered. You're in the palm of your hand. You have access to so much information to make different changes. The next step after knowledge is investment. Where are you going to invest time, effort, and money to get to this? Because sometimes you really need to change how you think about yourself or what you think about a condition like having diabetes, whether that's okay with you or not, like being overweight, whether that's okay with you or not, like not being fit, like being mentally unhealthy, wherever that might fall. But again, the experts in these fields are frequently not aligned with the way that you want to go. And so if we're going to talk about younger tomorrow, the first spot that then I would actually go is your hormones. Really addressing hormones. So what hormones are we talking about? We're talking about a lot of them. Serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, for mood, for energy, cortisol, for stress hormones, leptin for fat burning, insulin for taking sugar out of your blood. But also things like human growth hormone, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, for feminine and feminine energy, or testosterone for muscle building, and keep in mind, men and women need both of these. But some of the stuff that it's linked to, the best drugs in the entire world on a research-based basis don't compete, don't even hold a candle to exercise for hormone balance. Exercise is linked to blood sugar regulation. It's linked to better fat burning. It's linked to higher metabolism. It's linked to better dopamine and serotonin responses. It's linked to increased testosterone. There's so many things that exercise is linked to. And while all exercise is valuable, the one that's most linked to anti-aging or being younger tomorrow is high intensity, short interval trainings, or HIIT training. Whether you're lifting weights but moving fast, whether you're sprinting and getting out of breath. A lot of times I hear people say, hey, my knees hurt when I exercise, so I can't. You can do HIIT training doing sit-ups. You can do HIIT training doing push-ups. There's exercise bikes that only move your arms. There's ellipticals. There's so many different components that can get you to get HIIT training. And we're going to cover some of that here in just a moment. Nutrition. There's so many things nutritionally that mess your body up. For example, processed soy blocks estrogen or mimics estrogen, lowers testosterone. Refined sugar, alcohol, smoking, these things block the building of the good hormones, and they allow for the increase in, for instance, stress hormones. Caffeine increases stress hormones. And then nerve system regulation, whether you're talking about sleep, energy, mood. Obesity is linked to lower sleep quality, but nerve system regulation. And so your posture, your stress level, your overall neurologic alignment, these all play factors into the hormones that your body is going to produce. And so let's start with exercise. Just increasing your exercise to 90 minutes a week has a decrease in overall mortality, or also being younger or living longer, by 20%. If you get up to 150 minutes, just 2.5 hours a week, decreases risks of Alzheimer's and heart disease by 50%. So metabolic conditioning, this is also shown to reverse metabolic syndrome, i.e. Decrease your waist size, increase your good cholesterol, lower your blood pressure. So metabolic conditioning, and you can type in, like on YouTube, HIIT workouts. If you go to our website and type in Max T3, there's all sorts of HIIT workouts, and they are complementary. Hormones. So you think about marathon runners versus sprinters. One of the reasons why we talk about HIIT training or shorter, more intense workouts, they tend to build muscle, burn fat, and increase your metabolism. The Olympics, I believe the Olympics are just getting started here. I think the opening ceremonies were very recently. Actually, I have a cousin who went to the opening ceremonies. You look at the different types of athletes based on the type of sport they do, changes their body type. So think about that. Based on the type of workouts you do is going to affect the way that your body looks and the way that your body feels. It's also going to affect your hormones. So why does long distance running increase body fat and decrease muscle mass? It's because you tend to burn through a lot of your muscle, but also it takes a lot more nutrition to repair. And also you increase stress hormones. So again, breathe hard, burn fat. Breathe hard, burn fat. Now, the next thing, neurologic fitness. So why does that matter? I mean, thinking about it, I just had a consult with somebody yesterday, and they were talking about how the previous 3 years to starting getting adjusted, how they were sick for huge parts of the winter, but within months of getting adjusted regularly, they haven't been sick in the last 15 months or something like that. Now, is that a guarantee? No. But why would that factor? How in the heck can your sinuses clear when you get adjusted? How can your immune system be stronger? Well, your nerve system regulates so many hormones, regulates your immune system itself. It regulates. And so when you mess that up, well, your body's supposed to be in a certain alignment. your head's supposed to be back over your shoulders. It needs to be. Your ears should be over your hips, over your shoulders. Each segment of your spine should move independently. That keeps a relaxed and refined neurology. And in fact, there is much supporting research that shows that regular adjustments help your body detox. They help your body clear. They help you relax. They help you breathe better. And so again, you might not necessarily go to the chiropractor for that. You might go because your back hurts. You might go, and then the other thing is the strain you put on it. How often do people, look down at their cell phone? I mean, I look out, sometimes people are wobbling looking down at their cell phone, but people who work at a computer, if you strength train really hard, but you don't get adjusted, you might get fixated or stuck between your shoulders. Your shoulders might round forward, which of course, not only causes neurologic compromise, but they make you more likely to, for instance, tear a rotator cuff or not be able to exercise or hurt your knees or, any of these different things. But the position that your body's in factors so much. In fact, if your head sticks out to a certain level and you get stuck like this, it's actually shown to decrease your lung capacity by as much as 30%, which affects VO2 max, affects the oxygen in your blood, affects how well you heal, affects how much you repair. And think about how many people have increased health benefits simply from getting a CPAP machine, by getting more oxygen forced into their body. And so again, when you look at this, or when you factor it in, and here's one last point. And if you've been a client for a long time, I talked about this maybe 5 years ago, but these are Siamese twins, Masha and Dasha. And the unique thing about this, and I believe they're the only human on record that has a combined circulatory system, but separate nerve systems. And the reason this is so relevant is actually what they showed with this having different nerve systems, but sharing the same blood supply, is that often only one of them would get sick. Often only one of them would get the flu. And one significantly more than the other. Even as contorted as their bodies are, even with all this stuff, it turns out that your nerve system is a huge, huge regulator of hormones and immune system function. And so many of you are aware of this, but we've had lots and lots and lots of people who actually have testimonials, or as they start to get adjusted, they do the exact same things, but their hormones regulate. We have tons and tons of people who feel like when they started to get adjusted, their thyroid worked, their Hashimoto's reversed, their metabolism got stronger. Now, again, is this guaranteed for everyone? No. There's so many factors to these things, but if you're ignoring it, you can take all the pills, all the medications, all the supplements in the world, and it may not work, or it may not work at the same level that it could. And the last thing I want to specifically cover today is that is these GLP-1s, Ozempic, Wegovy. What do they do? How do they affect me? But hey, they work. And actually, I heard they're natural. They're a peptide. And so there's a lot of factors to consider with this. I will not debate. Certainly they work. Certainly they work, especially the dosage that they're being given at. Now, the first mystery word, by the way, is metabolism. First mystery word is metabolism. But for these GLP-1s, because they're a peptide, in theory, they're natural. But there's a lot of factors. So what they do is they don't let your stomach digest food as quickly. Food sits in there. There's more satiety. They affect your pancreas. Now, there's all sorts of links to side effects because they're given at such high doses. So, people ask me about peptides sometimes. I'm not anti-peptides, but you got to know what the peptide's doing, what the potential risks or cofactors or side effects. And so, for instance, GLP-1s, not surprisingly, they've been around since way before Eli Lilly and these drug companies got a hold of them. But what they also have now done is, for instance, GLP-1s, with you not being as hungry, often people lose weight. They have muscle wasting because they're not getting enough protein in their diet, along with some of the side effects of the high dose peptide. There are other peptides that you can consume that might help with muscle repair, might lower the side effect risks. Also, depending on the health of your pancreas, they can cause major pancreas issues from anywhere from 20 to 50% of all users. There's a class action lawsuit that I just saw a couple weeks ago for 1,800 cases of blindness. We could go on and on and on, but ultimately, while this could be natural, the way it's being given is being given in a form of a drug. There's high side effect rates. Yes, there's body loss. Yes, it could be done in a healthier way. And so if you are using this, one of the things I would strongly consider you to encourage is to either ask your doctor to start at the lowest possible dose and then work your way up. Or if you're at a high dose but have gotten the results that you want, work your way off. These, just like most other drugs, very similar. If you read the literature, antidepressants, they're given at they're only studied for, depending on the antidepressant, for 3 to 6 months. They're supposed to be used in short-term intervals when somebody's going through a major life effect, not for years or for decades. They have all sorts of major side effects the longer you use them. Similarly, this drug class is supposed to be used in the short term to help people lose weight, change their habits to affect their more addictive associations with sugar or binge eating or mood-based eating or whatever it is, change their habits and then get off of them. They're not meant to be a habit keeper and then a stay on situation. So, at this point, there's a ton of spots that you can read. There's a great Joe Rogan podcast where they go into all the different ways that these GLP-1s can affect you. But if you want to spend 3 hours on it, spend 3 hours on it. This is meant to be a couple minutes. But, again, even in ChatGPT, you could type in, hey, what are the benefits and the risks of GLP-1s and how can I reduce my overall risks? And the biggest way is to use lower doses if you're going to use them at all. But if they're going to help you get off a bunch of other medications, great. But remember, if you're not ultimately working backwards to try and get to a point where you are drug-free, medication-free, and healthy because of your lifestyle choices, balancing your hormones, these are the things that are going to help you to be younger tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll talk more on Tuesday. Have a very blessed